All right, welcome everyone to this webinar, and sorry for the slight delay. We had some last-minute technical issues, as you always have when you're trying to do something online and live. I think we're doomed, Pierre. Last time we were supposed to do a live LinkedIn podcast, and it did not work at all. But now it seems to be all good, so welcome.
Last time we could blame LinkedIn. Today we can't.
Yeah, I don't know if it's only ourselves we have to blame. But a super warm welcome to all of you to this session on generative AI and classic AI in the domain and context of marketing and sales. And we are here today with you. My name is Emma Storbacka. I'm the group CEO at Avaus, and my algo leap was creating an image recognition algorithm for my flower. An algo leap, Piero, could you share what is that and what was yours?
Yeah, the algo leap is this beautiful exercise, and we probably should mute. I guess, I hope it's not coming from my side. Thanks. Yeah, so the algo leap is this beautiful exercise we do mobilizing the Avaus organization, and every person in Avaus needs, to get super familiar with algos, get the hands dirty, and trying to, build stuff. Mine was trying to build a sort of virtual Avaus consultant. We did together with other colleagues this exercise using a sort of Avaus GPT, but we'll tell more about it.
Great. So I'm the group CEO, and Piero is managing our Italian market. We also were supposed to have a German representation here today, but Stephen unfortunately had to attend to family matters. So we're going to take you through the agenda today. And what's on the agenda then? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between classic AI and generative AI. We're going to talk about how to find and address all of the value that is within this whole domain in marketing and sales. Then we're going to talk about some of the learnings that we've had so far in the proof of concepts that we have done with a set of clients in the past month or so. And then a few pointers on how to organize for scaled value in AI, because we know that the hardest thing when it comes to AI and data is not getting started, it's actually getting to scale. So we'll share a few pointers on that. There's going to be a very dense agenda, and all materials will be sent out and available online on our website, so you don't have to take screenshots or be very busy trying to capture all of the information. We want to make sure that we democratize all that we have, and therefore we're preparing quite a dense set of insights and learnings for you. So I hope you will enjoy, and I think we're ready to get started. During the session, you have the opportunity to ask questions, and you do that in the question box, and you can also vote on each other's questions. So if there's anything coming up, please don't hesitate to ask a question for us to be answered at the end. We don't know everything about this topic. We're also learning all the time, and we have a lot of skilled experts with us at Avaus. So if we can't answer your question, we'll make sure to get back to you later with some answers. So who's Avaus then, and why are we here talking about AI in marketing and sales? Well, that happens to be what we are focused on. So we're a Nordic boutique consultancy, and we only specialize in turning data into value by using automation and AI in marketing, sales, and service. And over the years, we have collected a lot of best practices and developed a lot of good frameworks and methodologies, and you'll hear about some of those today as well. Typically, we support rather large organizations that have a lot of data, have a lot of customers, and have a lot of value to be gained from data automation and AI. And if you're interested in reading more, there's lots of stuff on our website. We take pride in creating a lot of good content for you to learn from. Now, over the past years, AI has, of course, now more and more become a household topic and an item that even I talk to my mother about. In 2018, we started to develop our methodologies, and we brought this data algo action framework for creating a joint language between marketers, salespeople, IT, and data science experts. And we launched a cookbook, and we also launched our internal AlgoLeap initiative that we sometimes do with our clients as well. But back in that time, AI was really not on the agenda of all organizations. The few very mature ones started to realize that in order to scale, we need to do something different. And we developed our factory model and some technical accelerators to do that. And in the recent months, we know that generative AI has really become a household topic. And we've been doing a lot of experimentation and also technical development of our own accelerators and assets in this field. So when we refer back to some of Avow's methodologies and best practices, these are things that we've been working on for several years. And actually, our first AI work was more than 10 years ago. And it's been quite an interesting ride, because what's happening in the field of data and automation is that the availability for anyone to do machine learning and AI it's absolutely democratized. And even our team members who graduated as data scientists from university, the role of the job they do has basically been reduced to finding out which model from all of the available open source models you should use, rather than developing on your own, which was the case just 10 years ago. So there's immense potential, and it's available for all of us, where it wasn't 10 years ago. So what is then changing now with generative AI? And what's the difference between generative AI and classic AI, as we like to call it? Let's dive a bit into this topic next. So classic AI use cases on the left-hand side here, that's what we've been working on for a long time. Typically, they are more rules-based in the approach and more limited tasks. And in marketing and sales, what you would typically see is, for example, recommendation engines, advanced analytics, predicting, for example, what customer is likely to churn or what product or offer would be suitable for a certain customer. And it's been demanding rather large data sets for organizations to actually be able to leverage these algorithms to drive better decisions and automate processes internally. And it's also been a lot about having the right competence and having the right data scientist, for example, working with that data to turn it into valuable insights. Now, generative AI, made popular last November by OpenAI's ChatGPT, where it became something that you talk to with your taxi driver, it has a slightly different approach where it's more about a learning-based approach, and we're able to generate original content. It could be text, images, voice, and so on. And it also can reason with itself. So when you're prompting and discussing with ChatGPT, for example, you can sort of tell it what to do more and less of, and you can instruct it as you go. And in marketing and sales, we all know the use cases. It's a lot about how do we generate tactical content? How can we do better chatbots in our customer service? And how can we design new ideas or new products or new creative content that we can use in our marketing and sales delivery? All of a sudden, we also are able to use much more unstructured data and also data that perhaps organizations hadn't been thinking of even is data. And we also see now that it's not only about the data scientists and the data teams, it's about getting domain experts involved in that training process to be able to verify whether the generated response makes sense or not. We've all heard about hallucinating generative AI algorithms. And more typically in the generative AI domain of marketing and sales, we see that the Gen AI is augmenting our decisions. It's not making decisions for us, but it's maybe helping us make decisions on strategies, on creative content, on approaches for solving problems. And we also have more of a human in the loop thinking when it comes to generative AI, where we can monitor the output and control the quality, at least for the time being. And the point is with both of these is the competitive edge will be what data you have available. It's not the model itself, it's what data you have available and how good you are at actually generating automated and scaled outputs. And to demonstrate that, no company will have a competitive edge by developing, the actual models. There are lots of models being developed by international tech giants, and we have here on the left-hand side, we can just see one example of some classic AI recommendation systems where Microsoft and Meta and Google and so on have their own. But then for generative AI, text, image, audio, 3D video, you can see that there are new models coming all the time and developing better and better and more efficient models that basically, in many cases, you in your organization can use. So it's not about the quality of the models being where we should focus. It's about what data we put into them and how we're making sure that the output is being used. So this might be the feeling of what the world looks like right now. If you've been working in AI for some time, as we have. So all of a sudden, everybody is very interested in generative AI, and all of the value potential still remaining within the classic AI domain is sort of forgotten or maybe put a bit to the side for the time being. And I see some smileys coming in there, so maybe you recognize. And we see that this is for a few different reasons. So one of the things is, of course, the same experience that we've all had when we first tried out ChatGPT, which is the immediate wow factor of, wow, I did not think this was possible. And that in a democratized way where every single person is able to try out in a way their view of, I wonder if this is possible, but it will never be able to answer this question. And everybody getting that wow moment for themselves, of course, creates an immediate attention that hasn't been possible before. We had a roundtable last week where I think a client put it very nicely that classic AI has been about, doing these incremental improvements, let's say in average spend or incremental improvement in conversion rates. And that result comes, 6 months ahead or maybe 12, because you can't see the impact immediately. Whereas generative AI use cases typically showcase a 10x improvement in, time spent doing a certain task, or maybe 100x improvement. And you can immediately see how this would be applicable in your organization to perhaps save in headcounts or in time spent doing menial tasks that you are able to automate. So this situation, of course, creates a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement, which we think is good because you can harness it also for the classic AI use cases. And we'll look into some of those soon. Before doing that, it's of course also important to recognize that there are risks and there are concerns about where the world is going when it comes to generative AI. And when it comes to marketing and sales, those use cases and those algorithms aren't going to be the ones that takes over your organization and starts, going totally, into this futuristic dystopian computers taking over the world situation. But no company can sort of leave the potential for operational efficiency and for future-proofing your business in a way untapped. You need to go after that value potential, but you also need to be a sort of corporate citizen where you actually are for regulation and also are quite clear on your needs so that you can communicate with regulators on how you aim to use data and AI to improve your business. And for Avaus, one of our main missions is really the future-proofing of the European market. And we believe that we need to be careful with not over-regulating in this domain so that we don't put ourselves in a position where we cannot compete globally with other companies. So keeping that in mind, but still going after the value potential. So I'll stop here and we'll do a little bit of reflection. So Piero, talking about all of this potential and the attention, and you having a background in the corporate life before becoming a consultancy director for our Italian business, how do you, I mean, you have been driving classic AI agendas for a long time. What do you see now being different from then?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you said it a few charts before. I think this democratization effect that, you know, ChatGPT in particular has brought, the fact that, you know, management can try AI directly and feel it, has been the big change and the big reason for the hype and the attention. Because I used to joke with my team, you know, that we had a disadvantage compared, for example, to the app team, because the app team, you know, you can show to the CEO the app, you can say, look how easy it is to use. It's an experience that the management can have. When you talk about AI, try to talk, you know, about having a model that is more accurate than another one. You know, everybody's talking about their model being the best. It's difficult to grasp, and the management becomes a bit skeptical sometimes. But generative AI, you can feel it and touch it.
Yeah, and I think we see that all the time with these wow moments happening in a way, not only on PowerPoint slides, but in real life. So when we know that there's a lot of value then in AI, so how should you go about addressing that value, be it either generative or classic AI? Let's have a look at a few best practices and our point of view before we then jump in to learn from the pragmatic use of AI and in the proof of concept that we have been doing lately in the generative AI space. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, we have this data algo action use case framework, which we think works very well when you want to bridge the gap in your organization to get people together and talk about what data do we have, what algorithms or intelligence are we going to apply to it so that we can automate what types of actions. And by thinking about AI, not only focusing on the algo, which is actually the smallest piece here, but rather talking about the end-to-end framework, we create a more business-driven way of addressing the potential of AI in your organization. So if you then address the potential through the data algo action use case framework, you will quickly learn that there is a massive amount of use cases that you could apply AI to. And that is a very good realization because scale will be what brings benefits. There's not going to be one or two best of breed use cases or silver bullets that you only need to focus on. There's going to be many. And when you start listing them, it's quite important that you're granular enough in assessing the value potential, how easy it is to do, who it's going to impact, what the data privacy and security aspects are, what type of compliance and copyright issues you might need to face, and then of course the ethical side of things, the biases and the traceability of the model. How did it reason to do the decision it did or the suggestion it did? And by assessing all of these 6 factors, you can go from a sort of long list of could do into a maybe shorter list of should do. And addressing also ethical concerns and risks through a use case lens is very useful, because otherwise we get quite easily caught into a sort of what if type of discussion. But when you have very granular use case descriptions, you also can have a more meaningful discussion, both with your technical colleagues to look at feasibility, but also your legal colleagues, for example, when it comes to privacy and security topics. Now, why is marketing, sales, and service such a great area to start with in the generative AI domain? I think by now, many enterprises have realized that the most natural places to start the generative AI journey is in these functions, if you don't calculate or if you don't take into account that everybody will use ChatGPT and these types of technologies to just generally become more productive. And then, of course, in IT, you will have a productivity increase from using co-pilots in technical development. But marketing, sales, and service, of course, are very relevant when we talk about text and code and image and voice generation and audio, voice and video generation. And marketing, sales, and service is also where you are able to develop on a fairly fast scale with fairly low risks of testing things out. So marketing, sales, service is a great place to start. The generative AI use cases as a whole, not all of them, but as a main principle, are very good at increasing productivity. So it's basically replacing work with automation. You can generate, for example, marketing copy, you can generate customer service inquiry responses, or you can generate better advice in, for example, a sales process, or you can generate sales materials. And those are the areas we see typically are the ones most feasible also to do proofs of concepts on. But while generative AI use cases drive productivity, the classic AI use cases are typically about making better decisions. The better decisions on how to go to market, where to place your bets, which clients to focus on, how to spend your media, those topics are going to have a much bigger top line effect typically. And that's why you want to balance the two of these together and bring all of the use cases into the same process of evaluation. So you don't only make your AI agenda about a cost agenda, but also have sort of the upside and the top line agenda with you in your AI journey. Now, the last point I want to make before I hand over to Piero is that we see that many organizations struggle with the classic AI agenda already. So there have been a lot of investments done in data, in personnel, in different technologies. But the gap between all of the investments in this digital transformation or data transformation are not bridged into the value that was promised. And it's good to realize that any of those reasons that are holding you and your organization back in your classic AI journey are very likely to be holding you back also in your generative AI journey. So when your management team is super excited, you need to look back at, why have we been struggling to scale the value in classic AI use cases, and make sure that you use this momentum to also find a resolution for those. And we see that most of the reasons are not technical in nature. It has more to do with your culture in your organization. It has to do with unclear business cases and targets. And it has to do with not focusing enough on change management. Because if you let data do the decisioning, if you let AI do some parts of your job, that's going to be a big change. And if you're not focused on solving also the emotional and the learning paths needed in your team, then you're going to have a problem bridging the gap from investments to value. So there, Piero, what have we now learned from a theoretical perspective that you can share some pragmatic examples of from what we've been doing with clients in the recent months.
Thank you, Emma. And just to clarify a disclaimer, I'm talking from Italy today. In Italy, there is a super attention to this, but there is as well in other countries where Avaos operates. So what you will see is actually a wrap-up of what we have seen as management in Avaos. So if we go, I have a couple of charts on these. If you help me, Emma, with the first, I think the first consideration is not, yeah, thank you. The first consideration is that, some clients have asked themselves, shall I start now? Shall I wait for the technology to become more mature? I mean, we believe that starting now is the right decision. And the first reason for that is that in terms of technology maturing, the speed that we see is huge. I don't remember having seen any other type of technology that I've looked at, ramping up with the speed at which generative AI is. And to give you an idea, initially we started with these, big giants that had the benefit of training very large models thanks to their, superior capability of spending or capability of computing. Well, now there are already, as I speak, more than 30 open source models out in the market. And, even you might have heard about this memo that a Google senior expert wrote that leaked out, which is the one on the left. They also believe, irrespective of any improvement they can do on their BARD, capability, etc., there is nothing that will not be replicated outside. So we expect a sort of commoditization of this type of technology. Also, the cost of, running the models is going down very fast. So in general, what will make a difference will be the proprietary data of each and every company, so you, and also the learning process in making sure that you take this capability and you create a concrete use case out of it. And that takes time. So the sooner you start, the better you will develop that competitive edge. That's our strong belief. So that's in general strategic terms, but in practical terms of experiences and how have we tested this also in Avaos. I think the very first test that fascinated me a lot, actually, you remember about Emma, was when we decided to start to use the API that was available from OpenAI to create a sort of what we call an Avaos GPT. So the idea was, let's ingest all the content, all the knowledge that we have internally, and let's try to see what I jokingly referred to at the beginning of this session as the virtual consultant. So let's see if he's able to answer based on its knowledge base. And we did that with a proprietary GPT. So basically using, of course, the natural language capabilities that OpenAI made available, but then training a local version of the model with proprietary data. And then, all the components and the knowledge that was developed in that first exercise then was translated into a potential offer for our clients to do something similar. So to create their own GPT. And then we started, and this is what we are doing at the moment, and we're running it with several clients. We started to create POCs and tests of using the own GPT for multiple use cases. And the first ones that we have been exploring that you see on the page are initially, of course, something similar to the Avaos GPT. So, creating a chatbot assistant that is basically answering questions on a given knowledge base, on a product learning. For example, you can scrape your existing website where you have a lot of product information and then feed that into the model and very rapidly start to see if you're capable to get a sort of assistant out of it on your product. That's the easiest, I would say, type of case. Then we move more into generation of, for example, sales documentation, service documentation, marketing content. Some of the clients had very complex products that become extremely customized, extremely combination and modularization of things. Of course, you can have an assistant that helps to create that sales pitch in a much faster way. That is a very interesting one. For example, we have Ranni. And then the latest frontier, what we're also exploring right now, is more all the customer operation area, where the idea is to have a sort of copilot that suggests to the agent what to do. And this could be, a chat agent to have a little bit more time to reflect on those suggestions. And then, you know, the most sophisticated things are rather with live agents, even in call. We are not there yet. I mean, so it's more on the chat side now. So that is a little bit at a glance what we have been doing. And then in parallel, we have also talked and learned what the customers have been testing themselves on the side. So I'll try with a couple of charts, if we start from the next, to summarize the first learnings that we're getting out. The first is this high sense of urgency. I think we said it before. I've heard, just to give you a small anecdote, for example, some clients saying, you know, I mean, it's very experimental. We haven't understood it fully. But on the other hand, we don't want to run into the risk that the CEO or somebody calls and say, our competitors went out with a press release. What are we doing? So there is clearly a peer pressure, right? There is the need of start to experiment and be ready. So that is clear. On the other hand, you know, the solid management, you know, take more a CFO perspective, saying, okay, this is also such a hype right now that we need to bring this down to concrete results. That's why what Emma talked about, use case approach. So rather than tinkering on million things, you know, going down to a concrete use case and try to extract value and understand if this is easy to put in production is the big discussion, you know, that all serious clients are doing. But what I've also noticed with pleasure is that almost every large, at least a very large organization I've been talking to, had already started to run experiments, and that's excellent. If you help me with the next one, going a little bit more down on the specific use cases. You remember the map that Emma was showing, right? With mostly customer operation, marketing, sales, IT. That is something that I think everybody has recognized now. In terms of impact, I think the very early impact is mostly demonstrated on the IT side. So the productivity in coding, we have cases, we have clients already saying we witnessed that, ranges 20, 40%. The other area that was, you know, an easy test, and several clients have started to use that, is using it for marketing copy. That, of course, is very simple because you can use just, you know, a ChatGPT interface. I mean, you don't need to set up a complicated process here. So that clearly, you know, increases productivity. On the other hand, the teams we are talking about here are content, you know, production of this type, especially text, is not a huge amount of people working on that today. So also the impact is limited. What everybody's looking at, I would say, is more the area of customer operations, right? Where you have, of course, large numbers and large and big costs. And I think here, is early to talk about evidence of impact. What I think there has been a very interesting paper published by an MIT professor that has studied the first case, to my knowledge, the first paper that has studied that, about using a copilot agent to assist chat agents in a large software company that needs to provide technical advice to the customers. And what they measured there was, you know, in a very strictly scientific measurement, over 5,000 agents, 15% productivity improvement, which, you know, call center directors tell me is huge on a cost base, which is a typical cost center of a large telco or, you know, other large companies. So there is potential there. It takes a while to capture though. Last point I have here is that it's clear that, you know, everybody's noticing how much you can do already with some cloud capability. So you might have the temptation to say, okay, the large vendor will embed these, you know, Microsoft has said so, Salesforce has said so. It will take a lot of time. So working on your own version with your own data, with cloud solution right now, we believe is a better strategy than a wait and see. If we go to the next, and I will wrap up quickly here, I have 2 more pages. I think I covered that already when I say that this is evolving very fast. I will just add one important point. One thing is to tinker a little bit, you know, with ChatGPT and try to make a copy, and it works decently good. One thing is to say, I want to ingest my own data because my data is superior to, you know, the general internet knowledge that has trained these models. And I want this model to work with my data and become better and better through a strict training. This second approach, which is what we use in most of the use cases, require time. So initially you will get quite poor quality, and sometimes, you know, the chat will go back to its own, the chatbot will go back to its own natural language, generic internet knowledge to try to hallucinate something. There is a process for relentlessly training with your own subject matter expert and correcting these answers. And this is not just, you know, training and providing feedback and refreshing the data that he uses, but is also working a lot on master prompt engineering and in general prompt engineering. So all this learning is what I was referring to in my first comment a few minutes ago. And this takes time, but this is something that once you have accumulated stays. So even if you then decide to have a different provider, it's in any case possible to use that knowledge. Right. Last one, then I'll give it back to you, Emma. On data, as I said before, I think still the source of competitive advantage is your own proprietary data. So you might have heard about, you know, Bloomberg investing in this, AstraZeneca investing in this. I mean, the edge is the proprietary data that these companies have, which nobody else have. And, you know, the generic model trained on generic internet doesn't have. So this is clear. Most of you, I think, in the call know that, you know, how data governance has been always important, and the definitions and the preparation and all annotation, all the preparation work that has been done in typical classic AI, I think is completely impossible to believe that now generative AI will make that work obsolete. That work is still extremely important. What we have noticed in the first test is if you just ingest data, text data in the model, you get a much poorer performance than ingesting a data that went through some sort of pre-classification, pre-annotation, pre-preparation. So that capability, and having done it before, immensely improves the quality of what you get out of generative AI as well as it was for traditional data. So the long-term data strategy and data investments are still key and super crucial. A last point we have on a bullet on synthetic data. Of course, these models can work well with synthetic data, so you can, you know, get some advantage in generating those. Of course, with a word of caution, because if you use them too much, then the quality of the model degrades in time because of its probabilistic nature. I'll stop here, Emma. I probably even went a little bit more than planned.
No worries. It's so interesting. One thing that we hear a lot of, and it's a typical question, is, you know, who should be doing this learning? Like who is learning in the organization? And typically in the past, I think proofs of concepts have quite often been of a quite technical nature. You're sort of trying out, like, will this work technically? Can the model predict this type of behavior or this type of output? Who should be driving, and who do you think is driving the learning process currently in the ones that you come across?
So, you know, my strong belief has always been business needs to drive this, no? Even traditional AI, no? You need first to clarify what is the use case, what do we use it for, where is the value coming from, then you go backwards and you see the technology that helps you to get there. So that's, I always believe, is still absolutely valid. What I see very interesting now is that in the past, very often there was a lot of push, also due to, you know, very good activity by tech vendors. I'm thinking, think about marketing automation platforms with Adobe, Salesforce, a huge effort of these tech vendors to explain how this can be valuable, do proof of concepts. This time is different. This time it doesn't come from the tech vendors. This time is really, as I said at the beginning, the management, the general management, the top management is super interested in this. So it starts naturally from a business angle, which is great, because it of course starts to channel into the most promising use cases.
And would you give the advice then to an organization where the learning isn't happening in the business parts, that perhaps don't let it become a technical question or an analytical question, let's say like this?
Of course, yes. I mean, one thing which is, I think, very powerful is to have someone in the organization that is in the lead to, let's say, start to explore this, but then rapidly create some idea generation workshop and try to say, where does it make sense for us? And then runs the first test and start to engage the top management in showing that you can get rapidly to some results. I mean, that process of, evangelizing within the organization, I think is very promising.
Great. And if you do the business case and if you know what the value is, then it will be a topic that interests the management. So the last section, and this is going to be quite short, but maybe just to share how some of the organizations we work with are going for scaled AI value, and what type of method would help in getting started for taking sort of the long-term view and not only the short-term learning. So while we think that's important, we also need to understand that the journey towards the scaled value is going to be, years of work. And we quite often draw it like this, that you have a pretty big mountain in the beginning where you need to make a granular plan and set yourself up for success. And in order for you to do that in a successful way, you sort of need to understand what are the hiccups that you are likely to meet later on down the road. Not only looking at the first build mountain, which is maybe about what technology to choose or how to organize around this in the initial phase, but actually knowing what might go wrong or why might you not be getting the value 2 years ahead, 3 years ahead. And the way that we typically recommend that you do is that you create a fairly granular plan. And you might do this after running a proof of concept or in parallel. And the most important thing is that you are very clear on the value sizing. So how much business potential is here, which also makes it a bit more of a critical question, how do I avoid the pitfalls later on? And then you need to be use case based and do detailed planning of the use cases. And we typically do this through something we call an explore, prioritize, and plan process. And whatever your process is, this could just be an inspiration, but I think this method is fairly good and also could provide some value for any organization looking to scale. So typically, the first thing you want to do is to make sure that you create a common language and that you assess your current organization's ability to drive value from data. And we, for example, have a data to value barometer that assesses your ability on 7 different factors. You can go to avaus.com/barometer if you want to run the assessment for yourself. And then do a very careful business case where you have actually quantified the value that you expect, both from productivity increase, for example, with generative AI, but also the top line. So if we can know better where to sell or which clients are most likely to convert, how can we optimize the way that we spend our resources? And when you've done those things, you have explored all of the areas with your organization that gives you the right platform to start discussing what to actually do. And that's what you do in the prioritize phase. And this is when you start talking about use cases. So one of the most important things we find is that you are quite clear on your priorities, which then will emphasize the right things when you need to prioritize. So some organization might, for example, feel that the faster you get to your target automation level, the better. Some other organization might feel that the business results matter the most. And some third organization might feel that as long as my team is involved and we're creating organizational capabilities, the results don't matter as much or the speed don't matter as much. Through this lens, you then start categorizing all of the use cases that you've identified. They might be the ones that I showed earlier on a few charts, and probably tens more in different types of areas of your business. And then based on your prioritization framework, you can then cut it down to a short list of maybe 10 to 20. So not one or two, but 10 to 20, which would be the ones that you want to develop in the first year or year and a half. And for those, you map very solid and granular technical and non-technical requirements. So maybe one thing to take away here is that we often see that organizations only do this for one or two first use cases, but you sort of miss out on the hard parts, which is how do you reach scale if you don't do this for a sort of large enough amount of use cases. You also don't set your organization up for scaling if the organization doesn't understand that we're going to have to do like 100 of these, and we need to get more efficient at scaling as we go. So then when you have that more granular plan, then you can start looking into your technical solution, the KPIs and the specific milestones and targets, which will of course then be dependent on the roadmap and the resourcing. So of course, the faster you go, the more expensive it will be, but also the business case will likely pay itself back earlier. So doing this balancing act on a fairly granular use case-based level is going to help you have a more credible and clear message to your CFO and your board if needed. And what we typically see is that doing this process is quite tedious. It's not super easy. And we often help in making that part faster and more granular than you maybe would be able to, because we have done this many times before. So if I summarize what my advice would be, whether you do it exactly like this or in some other type of planning process, the first thing is you need to have very clear ambition for your scalability in a very, again, granular and concrete way. So we want to have these 100 use cases rather than we want to personalize more or we want to be more effective. You need to have a granular enough plan so that you actually force technical development into this productivity mode rather than an experimentation mode. And then you need to be very clear on what's important. So we often see that there is a mismatch between what the management wants to see, which typically is results, versus what the experts in the organization, especially if it's an in-house organization, want to see, which is, I need to build my team. I need to have these people here with me. We need to own the solution and so on, which might be slowing you down. It could be a deliberate choice, but then at least you need to make sure that your management is aware of the trade-off. So you don't run into the situation where you make this trade-off without clear, explicit consent from your management team. And then as you go, focus of the governance of all of this process should really be on the business results, because otherwise we have this tendency of getting lost into the sort of technical jungle and being quite short-sighted in development. So this is based on our 15 years of experience, and I hope you can take something away from this that will help you in your process. So we've reached the end of our presentation. There is a summary slide, which I will not go through, but it will be part of the materials and you can screenshot it if you want. And I also wanted to just say that if you want to do something inspirational with your management team, one of the things that we've been doing a lot of lately is to set up these sort of hands-on wow moments with the management teams of our clients. So the first step would be to have a meeting to discuss what that could be. And then we run your data into some of the models that we've developed, and then together show something that will create a wow and maybe some discussion around how could we scale, what have we learned so far, what has not been working before, and also help you have that dialogue with your management team. So Q&A, I know that we have some questions coming in into the question box. So let's see here. Pierre, I'm going to hand some of these to you. So Peter here has asked, in what ways could AI potentially be used to support in the data preparation and data structuring process to utilize generative AI better, I guess. Would you like to answer that one, or?
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, I think the answer is, of course, it can help. It can help a lot. For example, I was thinking about a very concrete case in which, we had extraction of some chats with a very complicated, text, but with very complicated structure in it. And if you ingest that as is, as I said before, in the generative AI model, you don't get a lot of quality answers. But if you do a first step in which you restructure this as a proper conversation, so that the model can understand it is a conversation and who is saying what, then it answers much better. The interesting part, I would say, is using it in Cascade. So you use generative AI for do that cleansing for you. That is absolutely possible. It does it very well. And then you pass it to the core model in a clean version. That is absolutely possible, just as a first idea.
One example I could come to think of is that I know many web teams are struggling with sort of having good enough content on the website, but also good enough, for example, metadata on the web. So that's where generative AI can help you generate that data, which then together forms a better data set to train a model on. So that's a very pragmatic, clear thing that you could do, but the potential is massive.
I interrupt you one second because I see the moderators are complaining about the quality of your voice, and maybe they catch us that this is not Emma, it's just the generative AI avatar. No. While we fix the voice, maybe another comment on the content production. Actually, I found extremely insightful some insights that are coming, from US that I was getting lately. We all have seen and got excited about the capability, for example, of ChatGPT to create completely new content, right? So just tell me a joke, for example, and you say, fantastic. What, time is showing now is that the probabilistic type of model that generative AI is, or is behind generative AI, has also a strange effect, which is that if you ask many times to the chat GPT to give you good jokes, what you will notice in time is that the jokes start to be the same. And of course, at in the very first days was not easy to see that, but apparently people that have had the patience to test it, they say that it starts to converge. So I also believe, like I saw in the chat, that this is not a tool to generate beautiful new ideas, honestly, for marketing. At least I personally don't see it there now, but is a productivity enhancer. I mean, it's about, if you need to do 20 variation, if you need to change the tone, but you have the idea, it helps you to go fast. I don't see it, like substituting creativity, honestly, at least not this year.
How's my voice now? Am I
an AI avatar?
Very synthetic, okay. Then, Piero, you will need to answer the questions and take us through the last part, and I'll see if I can set my mic up.
I can try to do that. I think, the last one I see, because the others, I think data preparation, data structuring, we talk about, and not churning out the same marketing content. I hope I partially answered to that. There is another question: what level of data preparation and model training is required to effectively leverage generative AI? I would say it varies a lot from the use case. So what we have seen is that, for example, if you have a use case which is related to knowledge base, and you are able to put the right master prompting and making sure that you isolate the answers of the bot from, a generalistic GPT to only the knowledge base you have ingested, through multiple rounds, you can get there, I think, with a decent level of quality quite fast. On the other end, if you need to, for example, interpret, this is what we're seeing, interpret agent chats, and then you need to derive a copilot for more agents out of that. So then the training part is big. And it requires weeks, and then you need to have subject matter experts, or in this case, team leaders, agent team leads, etc., that spend significant time in talking, correcting, and reacting to what the chatbot is spitting out. So it's very variable, I would say.
What about now?
Excellent now.
All right, change the microphone. So we have 2 minutes more and no more questions to answer. If there are any more questions, feel free to just ping us on LinkedIn or email or whatever. But we wanted to share a few upcoming events that might be of interest for you. And maybe the most important one is that we're going to run a second year already, a workshop Wiesen in Munich. So at the Oktoberfest, we have a really interesting agenda where we both do inspiration. We bring some clients from the Nordics and from our markets together for peer exchange and inspiration, but also a lot of time spent together talking about these topics, because we see that many practitioners, many leaders really miss the opportunity to sit down with time and discuss with industry peers. So you can either just join the conference, or if you want to join for some of the Oktoberfest experience as well, we've managed to secure some hotel rooms and so on, and are happy to host you all in Munich. So check out the landing page or on avaus.com/events if you want to read more. And then in the fall, we already know now that we're going to have a few face-to-face events. We're going to run a few webinars as well, because there's so much happening and we want to share what we learn as soon as possible. But these are the breakfast and events that we have coming up in Stockholm and Helsinki during the fall. So make sure to schedule in your own diary already now. So that was it. Thank you so much for joining us. Piero, any last words?
No, I think yes, it's moving very fast, as we said. So I really look forward, to the next updates, what we learn in the next few months.
Me too. So have a happy summer, and thank you all for joining.